Joining us now, President Zelensky's former advisor, Igor Novikov, and the former deputy commander of U.S. European Command, Lieutenant General Steph Twitty. Welcome to both. Igor, it's good to see you. I know that a lot has happened since we last spoke. President Zelensky says that Russia is in complete chaos after the rebellion. How does President Zelensky's inner circle view both the past few days and how they can try to take advantage of Russian instability, primarily in the military?
Well, from what I know, Andrea, first and foremost, the situation, as Director Brennan said, is highly dynamic. So the assessments are happening constantly. The situation was incredibly dangerous because any chaos in Russia with, the mining of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and given what's happened with the Kakhovka water dam, could have led to unpredictable circumstances. Now, there are certain benefits for the front line for us to try and kind of push harder against the Russian defensive lines. But once again, the situation is dynamic, so no major disruption to Russia's military efforts so far observed by us.
General Twitty, Prigozhin called out Putin's pretext for war, calling it deceit. Listen to how residents in Rostov-on-Don reacted to Prigozhin's arrival.
Очень серьезные проблемы, и их нужно решать. И даже вот люди, которые уже не могут терпеть этого, они просто приходят к таким кардинальным методам.
Ощущение страха, естественно. Страх, паника, потому что непонятно, что будет и что ожидать. Вот и все.
На мой взгляд, если было допущено возможность ввода войск, причем не российской армии, а частной военной компании в город и захвата нескольких объектов, где-то надо.
And we also heard cheering in the streets and people taking selfies with Prigozhin and his troops. So what's the impact on morale among Russian forces? Clearly, they have the internet. Many of them were conscripted into service reluctantly.
Well, there's no doubt that Prigozhin is viewed as a rock star now. What really made him the rock star inside Russia was his win in Bakhmut. And he's really the only force, the Wagner Group's the only force that's had a tremendous amount of success there. And so he's going to be viewed as a rock star. Then to take the southern headquarters without a shot, that further makes him a rock star. And so as the Russian soldiers look at this, particularly as he accused them for firing on his troops and all the rhetoric that he's talked about with them not being capable to fight, I'm sure that there's a lot of animosity within the ranks. I'm sure there's a lot of distrust between Wagner and Russian soldiers. And so trying to integrate these forces as a result of this brokered deal, I think it is a recipe for disaster for the Russian military. As you already know, that there's a tremendous amount of distrust and disarray in the formation anyway.
And Prigozhin, General, today asked his troops how many wanted to be absorbed by Russian forces, and he says extremely few wanted that. What happens next to Prigozhin's mercenaries?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of loyalty to Prigozhin by his soldiers. And we have to remember that Putin used the Wagner Group as an instrument of power, not just in Ukraine, but around the world. They've been used in Africa, Central Africa, and Libya. They've been used in Syria. And so I don't see this force going away in its totality. It may morph to something else, but I don't see it going away. And I think Putin will continue to rely on this force. Maybe without Prigozhin in charge, maybe someone else will step up. But I think we're going to find here, if I'm a betting man, that this force will stay around in some form or fashion.
Igor, the NATO meeting is only 2 weeks away in Lithuania, and President Zelensky has indicated he will not attend. If NATO is still divided over NATO entry of Ukraine, could be provocative to Russia. What's the feeling in Ukraine about this, about not getting into NATO quickly?
Well, Andrea, I would probably split this into two separate issues. So NATO, joining NATO for Ukraine is vital for its future security guarantees. So I think, you know, most of the country, all of the country is looking forward to the day when we join. Now, the imminent kind of ascension to NATO is questionable because of some political resistance from some of the NATO members. But I would say the expectation on the ground is to have an open date invitation. So basically to get the confirmation that Ukraine will be a NATO member at some point, and that date is still open. With the Wagner mercenaries, by the way, if I may add to what my colleague has said, you know, the most dangerous part at the moment, I don't think that force will be disbanded. There are rumors that it will be stationed in Belarus and that the bases are being built. Now, after Prigozhin's antics, he becomes a wild card that can be used by Kremlin to do its bidding and to give Kremlin plausible deniability in any scandalous moves, such as an attack on Kiev again, or even an attack on a NATO member. So I think that situation should be monitored incredibly closely.
That is such an important point, Igor. Thank you so much.